Hey folks, thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. Today is a treat because of two reasons. First, Christopher Columbus, it took a crazy ass Italian American a day ago, or well, he wasn't American, but he did discover the New World by the name of Christopher Columbus. Today is Columbus Day in America. Whether you like it or not, it's Columbus Day and it was started by an Italian for discovering a whole new world. Now, I'm sure I'll get a strike for singing that little line. That's fine. I don't care. And also, today's pretty legendary because everybody was talking about Boris Johnson supposedly going to get his pee-pee smacked in America by the Queen over Brexit and leaving. And since we're diving into that subject, I brought a subject matter expert who happens to be an Englishman. You all know Baz. Baz, your takeaway on it. Did Boris
Yeah,
get his pee-pee smacked by the Queen?
no, no, not by a long shot, not by a long shot. If anything, it sort of strengthened his resolve and strengthened his position um, as sort of our prime minister. Uh, uh, again, a lot of the people and again, it's driven from the left wing narrative that yeah, she's gonna come in and she's gonna sort of fucking get a grip of him and just say you're not doing your job properly, yada yada yada. And all she did, if the viewers or the listeners care to listen to her speech, it's not on long. All she did was sort of lay out guidelines for our Parliament for the future of our nation and leaving the European Union, and she's decreed that it will fucking happen, like she decreed it after the actual referendum that we had. Yeah, so but by a long shot did our Prime Minister get his fucking PP smacked by our monarchy.
The leftists had to have felt as comfortable as a man having his testicles stepped on by a woman in flip-flops. They must have been like screeching over this. I'd love to see the reaction after her little speech. By no means am I pushing this site, but the Sun TV is the one that I watched it on YouTube. So if you can find it somewhere else, find it and support that person. But that is where you can get just the boiled down speech of the Queen and hear it for yourself. And what do you think about the truth? We have something similar here in the U.S. It's truth in sentencing, and it sounded like she's really gripped up on the judges in the UK. And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like it was just before the show started, we were having a little chat on the the actual hypocrisy of some of our judges, some of our um, custodial sentences. And like I said, you probably get it in the States, where somebody gets picked up for pretty much a minor crime, and I use the Count Dankula sort of fucking farce where he taught his dog to do a Nazi salute and got a prison sentence over it.
Well,
Where
they call just in America. All he taught him to do was like slap five. Okay, that's pretty much
mm,
the action the dog made because dogs you can teach them to do that. Shake hands, smack five, whatever you want to call it. But it
the
looks like a
he used
Roman
yeah
salute, and
he
so they.
obviously he used the word of command, Zeke Heil, to the dog. Now,
Oh,
the dog
okay.
doesn't know what Zeke Heil means or what it represents or anything like that. It's just a word of command, like sit or roll over. It was just Zeke Heil, and the little dog, puts its fucking paw up in the air, But obviously, people had a meltdown over it. And then, unfortunately, he got in front of some spineless fucking judge who then decided, okay, this person needs to do a custodial sentence. Where only in the matter of months, not even months, a couple of weeks ago, there was a renowned paedophile. Yes, obviously he's quite infamous in where he's from, in his area. It was on his sixth offence, had multiple thousands of indecent images of children, including babies. Now, from what I understand, some of these involved serious sexual assault, like rape and things like that. Now, because this fat piece of shit turned around and said, "I'm sorry," he didn't get a custodial sentence. But and I'm just like, I can't get my fucking head around it when you've got a guy as a joke for basically for fucking likes and clickbait on the internet has taught his dog to do a sort of a mockery of a Zeke Heil, and then you've got someone who's actually committed crime, who's part of an international paedophile ring. Because again, these pictures, like I said before, arresting him and charging this fat piece of shit paedophile, it's not denting the actual system behind these images and things like that. It's like a drugs cartel. You don't get the low end dealer, you know what I mean, who's just dealing $10 bags of fucking whatever on the street. You're going for the people that are distributing it, are actually manufacturing this shit. And it seems to be the same there. It needs to be the same. And I'm sure it is with child pornography. But to let these people off, it needs to be a set message. You know, if you do a crime, then you will do the time, you know. And there's no comparison to teaching your dog to fuck about and do a Zeke Kyle, to have loads of pictures, thousands and thousands of pictures of babies being raped. You know, where does this judge get off by just going, okay, then you've said sorry? Everybody's sorry when they get caught doing something.
Something wrong,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, everybody's we've all done it, even as children.
Yeah.
If you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, you're sorry when your dad comes in and finds you with your hand in his cookie jar. You know?
But while you're eating the cookies and nobody sees it,
yeah,
you don't give a shit. You're happy as hell, right?
Yeah, while you sat with your cock in your hand looking at pictures being raped, babies being raped, you're not sorry. You know, it's fucking. I don't know where these people obviously don't live in the real world. Most of these judges are of an elite class. Let's be honest.
Well, the recidivism rate for that pedophilia or any sex crime is almost 100% that they're going to reoffend. And I want to get off this subject because it really pisses me off. But I will agree with you that, look, that's the one punishment, stealing a childhood from a child. All nations and all people should be able to agree that that is a death sentence. Because those people will exist throughout time. But that proclivity, it damages people, you know, and damaged people, you know, become dangerous because you don't know what you're going to get from them. And that's just a real fact. And, you know, so look, in the West, we have been pushing people into roles that are unnatural. And you can end this by stop being silent, or you consent. That means your silence is consent. And with that being said, what's the next part of the speech you want to hit on that people may not have caught, but you grasp something from it?
Yeah, just to finish off that point there, I think what it does, in that case, it sent out a message saying, look, we are going to be, I mean, dependent on the judge. That judge now is not only reputation in ruins, but he's now seen as an easy touch. That if you've got personal use amount of Class C drugs or whatever, then you're going to go to jail. But if you've got like grade tier 1, like indecent images, if you say sorry, you're going to get off with it. What message does that send? And I think what the Queen was saying there is, look, you cunts need to get your fucking house in order, because how can you, in not so many words, how can you do this, but on the other hand do this? So as well as people getting out of jail early for some serious crimes, and she did lay down quite heavily on, look, if you're doing serious crime, you are going to do the serious fucking time to go with it. You're not going to just get a slap on the wrist, do a few months behind bars, and then off you go. Cheers, thank you. And on that as well, going on to another point, which leads nicely onto sort of another point that you touched on, was the safeguarding of our nation, not just through its armed forces, but when it comes to foreign nationals who are involved in crimes. Now, that can come under two guises. That can come under, you have them in the US, we have them all over the world, you know, people that have come from another country. Usually it's a shithole fucking third world country, and they've been a rapist or a murderer or whatever. They've been part of a terror cell, which I'll come on to in a second. You know, in their country. Now, because it's outside of UK or US jurisdiction, they come to your nation with a clean slate. if you know what I mean. They don't have a record in your nation, so they can get different jobs and stuff like that. And
I
it's
lo-
now that. Go on, brother.
I love the terminology she used when she described the British Armed Forces. Just to be very clear, she did not just say the UK's armed forces. She said our gallant forces in the UK. And I think that's a way we need to describe the U.S. forces too. Because we are both, whether people like it or not, England and the UK and America are bound at the hip because of our colonial past. And people also forget, and you can touch on this too. If people think I'm lying, you can set them straight. Our founding father, George Washington, his birthplace is right in London, and you can go see it any day you want. He was not born in the U.S. That's why it was natural born citizens after a date that could only be president. Because back then, most of the people in intelligentsia, or that could be a president, were not born in the U.S. because of the time span. They were born in the UK. And I don't believe it was called the United Kingdom back then. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. I think it was. It might have been. Why don't you tie those two loose ends up?
Yeah, it's George Washington, as he was actually fighting the War of Independence, was actually still a serving lieutenant colonel in the British Army. He was actually a
Yes, he
British Army
was.
soldier until obviously he decided to
Served in the
that
French and Indian War. Yep.
yeah, he'd had enough of the king's fuckery, so to say, which obviously he was one of the founding fathers, one of the main sort of stays behind what is now the United States of America. But yeah, going back to what Her Majesty said, she turned around and on the point of not the foreign nationals is, look, we're going to come down hard on these fuckers. If you come to the UK and you're a bit of a naughty cunt, or if you come to the UK and you then begin to be a naughty cunt, guess what? You'd be on the fucking first plane, boat, fucking banana box back to wherever you've come from. And it also covers terror cells, these fucking idiots that go and fight for ISIS. Guess what? You're not coming back into the UK. We're gonna take away your passport, and you aren't getting back in. Doesn't matter what your family fucking say or what the left say, and they kick up a fuss about, oh, but she's a British citizen. Or obviously, because we're dealing with one at the minute, she's fucking not. The minute that she decided to go and join a terror cell in the Middle East and take action or become a part of a terror cell that has struck the UK, that is treason. I mean, guess what? You lose your British passport. At best, you come to the UK and the death penalty should apply. Unfortunately, and I'm a strong advocate for it, we don't have the death penalty. I think the death penalty, for what we've touched on earlier on, is for convicted without a shadow of a doubt paedophiles or child murderers, yada yada yada. It should apply. But that is a conversation for another day. That I'm
Oh yeah.
digressing there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Uh,
What else was there? Oh yeah, the birthplace though of Washington, and also was it always called the UK?
oh yeah. So it's always been known as sort of the United Kingdom for quite a while. Before that, it was Great Britain. A long time ago, it was just England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales before we became a union. Obviously, because we were for a couple of thousand years, we've been at each other's throats. Especially sort of the English and the Scottish, the English and the Welsh, and obviously then we've got the Irish situation we're still dealing with until this day. So yeah, and George Washington is the house that he was actually born in. It's what's called a listed building there now. If you go to his house in London, it's got a blue plaque on the wall. Now that blue plaque basically means it's a protected building. Like they can't just some developer can't buy it and bulldoze it and build a block of fucking flats or condominiums. You know what I mean? That it cannot be done. The only people that can actually bulldoze a house is what we call English heritage. And the only time that will happen is if it becomes so unsafe for people to habitat or go inside. It needs to be removed, which I don't think it will. I've not heard of many sort of English heritage sites get actually bulldozed. So yeah, so you can check it out if you're in London and you're a sort of a US history buff. It's part of your US history, even though it's in the UK, because again, the UK played a very large part in the founding of what you know as the United States of America today. Again, the War of Independence was fought against our crown, which gave birth to your nation. You bunch of treacherous dogs.
Hell yeah, Red Lives Mattered, right? Uh, well, look, me and Baz take the piss out of each other as proper cunts that we are, but the point being is, there is a bond, a brotherhood, within a brotherhood. You know, a lot of people think they understand brotherhood, but they don't understand it. Uh, with that being said, let's move on to other portions of the speech you thought that were worthwhile to elaborate on for the American listening public.
Yeah, I think what it is as well is our national spending on our defence, because I know it's quite high up on POTUS's agenda that people, you know what I mean, toe the line, they pull their weight, and I've always felt that the UK has pulled their weight. Usually, anywhere the US goes, when it comes to fighting terror or in conflict, we're right alongside you. I think that's just a given. There's only sort of like certain instances where we've not sort of seen eye to eye on foreign sort of legislation and things like that people, because at the end of the day, you still need your nation's backing to go to war. I think on both sides of the pond, the last Gulf War that we were involved in put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths because of this WMD situation where anybody with a fucking more than 2 or 3 brain cells knew that that was a small part of it. The reason why we're there is to secure oil fields, you know, it's to secure oil fields. We know why we were there, and most people that wear the uniform and served out there know that it was for the industrial military complex. We are just tiny cogs in a massive machine. Um,
Oh yeah.
uh,
Now the
but,
first
but,
Gulf
but
War,
well,
the first Gulf War, I can touch on lightly. I've done it a couple of times, I think, even with you. Um, the actual reason of the first Gulf War, notice we didn't remove Saddam, but we did take down. That's the first time in the American lexicon they used to say NBC, nuclear, chemical, biological. Okay, NBC, and then they came out with nuclear, chemical, biological, and other weapons of mass destruction for the first Gulf War. And there was a system that we had, the Chinese had, the Soviet Union had at a point until they broke up, but they still had that technology. And Saddam Hussein had it thanks to Dr. Gerald Bull. And I've talked about this on several other shows before. It's nothing new, but there's a reason why Bull was assassinated in Brussels, so he could never do it again. And the UK actually are the ones who found the part. They were doing another set of large guns, and what I mean by large guns are super guns. People can look that up and see what that is. I'm not getting into it, but we had to destroy them and also the technology they had, which we did. And then the 100-Hour War happened, and it was over. Um, Anybody who doubts that the UK happens to go everywhere we go, I'm about to throw up a picture that Baz shared with me a while back. He can tell you, well, probably he can't tell you everything, but it's an interesting picture of a guy on a motorbike, got his kid on, nice little Taliban, chilling out, but he's in the crosshairs of somebody. And if you want to elaborate, you can. But if you don't have to.
yeah, that picture was taken in a place called Nari Siraj in southern Afghanistan in Helmand province, and basically that person there was part of a cell that had been blowing up U.S. Marines and the UK forces out there, all ground-holding infantry units. I was part of a task force out there. That was one of our roles, was to sort of like put an end to it. And that chap there decided to ride along on his little flip flop motorcycle, take out elements of what later became a AFP, an explosive form projectile, and he was basically what he was doing. He was laying the initiator part of it, and then another guy would come along later on and put the Iranian Dragon AFP there, and that actual road there was frequented it often by the U.S. Marine Corps that were operating down there. So again, those crosshairs were quickly put onto that individual. We watched him conduct his business. And when he was just about to stand up, he got a .33 at Lapua straight through his side of his rib cage, and it was good night Vienna. And then, as we pushed down to the firing point, the person in question obviously was expired. We called in the Royal Military Police. There came in, EOD came in. It was actually US Navy EOD that came in and confirmed it. And then 3 hours later, we thought we'll put in a bit of overwatch. And then the second individual came down to put the second part of the device in. He was actually a known individual, so as soon as we got eyes on him, we knew he was coming into the area. As soon as he stopped, he didn't know what had gone on. He thought the initiator was there because the EOD had left some wires there as sort of a bit of a come on, so nothing had looked out of place. And when he decided to plant his next device, then he too got the 338 sleeping pill. So it was a good day all around.
Yeah,
Again, that was just working in conjunction with obviously the US Marine Corps. Then you were working with there, and the 7th Group guys that were working alongside us.
Yep. That's the whole point of this thing, is that there is a inextricable and an irrevocable bond that we have with our UK brothers in arms, and that's just a fact, and nobody can sever those bonds. I'll leave that photo up so people can keep looking at it, but we can move on to other salient. You were on a tear about the UK forces and stuff on oh lordy, it's on the Queen's speech. I interrupted it to show that picture and so the people can actually see that, yes, and mine seeding, that's what we used to call it in the U.S. military. That was a major problem too. Remember, I was out on a combat outpost somewhere in Taliban, Afghanistan. Closest, it was the first combat outpost outside the Red Desert, and you know where that is, and where that's coming from. And the point was that we were there to do exactly that, anti-mine seeding, because that's all they did. They would seed mines, and people think, well, it's just the military getting hit by these valiant, I heard this said, and it made me want to, anyways, I'm not going to say what I wanted to do to the person who said it, but they were saying these brave freedom fighters for the Taliban or something like that. I can't remember how they the phraseology of it. It was some idiot from the Young Turks. But the reality is, uh, they also kill kids. It's as valid saying that about them as it's as valid as the Russians who used to drop toys during the Mujahideen days. They would drop fire trucks, other kinds of toys, teddy bears, laden with explosives and other devices to kill and maim kids. And that was one of Princess Diana's major things, was anti-mining. And a lot of people think that's what got her ticket punched when she was out with Dodi, Fayed. So your thoughts on that, and go back into the speech. Sorry for the diatribe.
Sorry, bro. Yeah, so it was one of her sort of like a big things. She was pretty much at the forefront of demining, uh, which obviously it affects us as a nation, and then by proxy it affects NATO as a whole. Is okay. How can we sort of like turn around and condemn the use of landmines in war when we use them quite prevalently ourselves? although not as willy nilly. I mean, if we lay a minefield, chances are it's going to be a temporary minefield unless it's a persistent one. But if it's a persistent minefield, it's basically World War Three. We don't really lay minefields anymore. We use claymores quite prevalently, but
Right.
again, there's rules and regulations about how we lay claymores. You can't just lay them willy nilly on a tripwire where anybody, farmer, a child, a Taliban, or anybody else can walk through it and initiate it. It cannot be. I'm trying to think of the word. It can't just blow up anybody. You know what I mean? It can't be just indiscriminate
Command
mind laying.
detonated.
Yeah,
Command
it has to be.
detonated.
Yeah, we have to command our munitions. So you sat there with a Schreiker clacker, and then obviously there's a command while you're going to the actual mine, or it's in proximity of your COB, your COP, your FOB, your mob, whatever your patrol base, where we were using them quite frequently on the outside. Um,
Within visible
yeah,
presence so that you can give a warning to a friendly that stay out, and it's clearly marked
yeah,
and by law in NATO. Unless it's a hasty minefield, like when the Russians were around, they had those aerial dropped mines and all that stuff.
yeah,
With the tornadoes, had an excellent system on that that Europe
yeah,
used. But the point was they're marked, and you have a map on there saying where it's at, so that if you leave that minefield, if there was a mine that goes off, they realize there was a problem. This unit did not pull their mines, whatever it is, and so you have accountability, and you have a way to send in proper types of demining people. I'll have my one buddy on again who's big into demining and clearing out those kind of items. Uh, I've done a show with him before, and Jim, so I'll have him back on to discuss the proper procedures again. But the point being is, you can bring in your UXO and your EOD teams even after the fact to clear your own nation's mind. And that's a NATO STANAG agreement, and that's reality of it. And sorry about the interruption.
let's talk about it. Yeah, so I mean, you look at places like Bosnia and where the were dropped willy nilly. She did a lot of work out there, a lot of work out in Cambodia and places like that. Um, so yeah, it was a large part of her life. Whether it actually had something to do with her demise, who knows? You know what I mean? It's like the Kennedy assassination. No one knows. There's a lot of questions that haven't
Right.
been asked, haven't been answered, that are still being asked to this day. Will we ever know the truth? Probably not. Um, yeah, so going back to the Queen's speech, so again, she touched on sort of like nationals committing crime, and obviously we touched on the terror, and then obviously she touched on our national health service. Um, Again, the listeners may be for or against socialised care, but I'm under the guise that socialised care isn't a bad thing. We pay over here what's called national insurance, which is sort of like it sort of goes towards your pension, it goes towards healthcare and something like this. It's about depending on what your salary is, um, it's about $150 a month. But with that, uh, if I was diagnosed with lung cancer today, I wouldn't have to pay a single penny towards any of my treatment. You know, and you see all this bullshit on fucking social media about, oh yeah, if you get lung cancer, you're going to die because you've got socialized healthcare, and that means you're the back of the queue. Bollocks, bullshit. Stop fucking running your mouth. Educate yourself. Do a bit of fucking research. You really think that somebody who's got pneumonia is going to come above the queue with someone with terminal lung cancer? Fucking stop being stupid. You
Well,
know.
I will
If
say,
go on, mate.
I will say from our brothers to the north, which is not the UK, I understand this. Um, our Canadian brothers to the north, and you've probably served with Canucks just like I have. The interesting part is I working the northern border when I worked for old CBP. There were many times, well, I can't really get into how we knew, but people would have had a treatment in the U.S., a radioactive type treatment, and there's a way you know when you cross the border. Any international border, you know if there's something radioactive. You know also know where it comes from. There's just anyways. There's a way we know. Anywho, if you're coming through a port of entry, let me make that very clear. If you're coming through a legal port of entry, we will know. And so this is the point to that. Um, you get to know these people and you actually get to know them, and you just have to annotate it in text, Treasury Enforcement Communication System. And it's they're coming back for another medical treatment. In Canada, that is a fact. I mean, some of these dudes were prostate cancer that was able to be uh, helped. They use a radioactive type of treatment where they actually put what they call a seed into the prostate and it will kill the cancer. I don't know how it works. I'm not a physicist, but I know that it's real, and it will trip detectors.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's just a reality to it. And then you just put it down as a medical, reason why, because you have to annotate why that detector went off. And there's different ways, but the most common thing that you would write is medical because, you can figure it out. There's different items developed by one of the agencies I worked, companies I worked for, SAIC. They have a little thing that tells you exactly what kind of source material it is and what its uses are for. It's
yeah,
pretty slick shit. So, and you got to upload it so that it can be double checked by the folks at SAIC from the raw data. And it takes about, I don't know, a couple hours, and then you sort it out. But you get to know the people, and they get to tell you, yeah, man, I have to come to the U.S. because in Canada they don't have the resources. So that's
yeah.
fact.
I know there is different issues with healthcare in Canada. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to Canadian healthcare. I can just speak on sort of my own experience, my own sort of like knowledge of the UK's.
Right.
Um, our healthcare system has been sort of like the framework of healthcare system, other socialized healthcare systems throughout the world. The NHS, although it's actually in fucking tatters because I won't bore you with it. It's again, it's a conversation for another day. But there's no set certain like booking systems and yada yada yada. There's a shortage of manpower, healthcare specialists, um, and but every healthcare system has got its own flaws and its own pros and its own cons. Ours is that guess what? I don't have to pay a single penny for any of my treatment. From the minute I feel sick and I ring up the doctor to me either being diagnosed clear or terminal of cancer, and then obviously my treatment until death continues without paying a single penny. The only thing that we might have to pay for over here is what our prescriptions. Like say if I go to the pharmacy and I want a course of antibiotics, it costs me something like $10. You know what I mean? It's like an administration fee, but that's it. If
Right.
you've got, let's say if I've got diabetes or something like that, it's just a repeat prescription. I don't need to pay $10 every time I go and get my insulin. Where again, like in the States, if you don't have healthcare insurance and one of your family members is ill and you are a fucking millionaire, then guess what? You're going to be up shit creek to a certain extent. I
That's
don't. I'm not an expert when it comes to your healthcare
well,
procedures
that's
over there, brother.
that's not quite true because you can get catastrophic health insurance. And yeah, they're
Yeah,
going to say, are you a smoker? Are you this? Are you that? And it does add to the fee every month of what you'll pay for health insurance. And it's usually provided by employers. But what
yeah,
Obamacare did was try to force health insurance on the people. Now, here's the bugaboo: people that voted for that and wanted this to happen didn't realize you can get health insurance for catastrophic. For probably if you're a young, fit man, even up to my age, you're fit, you don't smoke, this, that, and the other, maybe $150 a month, okay? That's comparable to what an employer would pay, and that's a benefit when you're employed, doing something. Self-employment now, and I can speak to this because I had to have corrective surgery for what they botched to fix me in Baghdad. And the funny part is, I paid out of pocket because I had the money. It's not a big issue. I'm not bitching about it. 25,000 bucks for the surgery. Because I paid cash, it was cheaper than if I would have um, had to pay, using a check or something, right? But I was able to pay cash. Fortunately, uh, at that time, I had the money, to do this. And the more interesting part is that DBA, Defense Base Act, once you separate from service, it's not like the military. It's not a military connected incident. I was, no longer in the military. And I was not working for a federal agency at the time when it happened. DBA stops when you leave theater. So if I would have had the, what it was, because I got hit in the gut, it was a hernia, what they call an incisional hernia, because of they I don't think they botched it, but they didn't sew it up right. Something they didn't do right. So now I got a piece of Gore-Tex in my gut. So that's what the fix is for it. And I had to get reopened because of that. It can be a problem. Um, but that's one of those things where I didn't have insurance, but still I would have found a way, you know, to have gotten it done. And so, it's ridiculous. It was ridiculous to try to force socialized medicine on the American people when our actual services are they're not that fucked up. And but see, that's something they don't want to talk about. They weren't using your NASs or whatever it is, NS, whatever you guys call it. You just said it
And
earlier.
NHS.
NHSs, they weren't using that as a guideline. They were using breaking the American paradigm of capitalism under Obamacare. That's what that truly was about. And you were having people all of a sudden getting hit with $600 and $700 monthly payments for their health insurance through that's mandated by the IRS to collect. So in effect, it's a tax. But see, they
Yeah.
said it wasn't a tax. They said it was voluntary. It's the same way they got the IRS in saying that taxing was voluntary. No, anytime somebody can enforce a regulation by threat of violence, i.e., coming to your house with guns, that de facto is a tax. And that's why the Chief Justice at the time, who still is, John Roberts, had to rewrite the law. He actually rewrote the law as what Obama said it wasn't, a tax. And that is the crux of that matter. It's the only time any justice in the Supreme Court has rewritten a law passed by Congress because it was that shittily done, because the intent was not what they said. The intent was to break capitalism. And anyways, I don't want to get into a full-on diatribe about that, but there are differences within all of our things. Like I said, I can only give you the anecdotal things of what I saw
Yeah.
on my northern border. I can only give you the anecdotal things that happened with me, um, but and people I know. But the reality is, fortunately, I've always had insurance since that time, uh, thanks to other reasons. So that's the point of the matter. But that's legit, and we can just move on to what you want to talk about. Sorry about that, bro.
Oh man, it's a yeah. I think it, to put it into sort of layman's terms, to redo your healthcare system in the States would be a bit like getting rid of the Second Amendment, or bringing in sort of certain gun legislation that's going to up just fucking turn everything on its head. You know what I mean? Where there's already things in place. People already have legal firearms in the US. They've got concealed carry, they've got open carry, yada yada yada. You know what I mean? It's same with your health system over there. Some people have paid X amount of thousands of dollars. You know what I mean, for the best healthcare they can get. Some people don't have healthcare whatsoever in the US. You know what I mean? They've got no insurance because they don't have a job, yada yada, or whatever. Okay, they live on the streets, for example, and they don't have everyday healthcare for diabetes or whatever. Um, they're the people that will benefit from it. But then it's those that have paid extra amount of thousands of dollars into their healthcare system. And how would you regulate it? Because the US is a completely different nation. It's a lot bigger. There's a lot more sort of cogs in the fucking machine, different states and stuff like that that make their own laws. Where in the UK we have sort of one lawmaking machine, and that is the UK government as such.
Oh
Um,
no! Let me correct you on one thing. That you said it's a logical fallacy because it's in a legal fallacy. In the U.S., um, if you're destitute, poor, if you're a street person, or whatever, you just show up at any emergency room, and this has been the problem in the U.S., especially with places where a lot of illegal immigrants live. They will come in with colds, flu, this, that, and the other, and overwork the system
mm,
of this. You
yeah,
show up at an emergency room by federal law and also by every state law. This is one consistency across all states. In an emergency room, you cannot be turned away. You have to be admitted and treated for whatever it is. So if it's a cold, that's taking doctors' time from, let's say, somebody who got a gunshot wound in the big cities. That's a big issue. And of course, where do illegal immigrants mostly flock to? Big cities, because that's where the work is. So that's the overload of the system that they were trying to push to get this to happen. So when you hear about X amount of people not getting service, that's a bullshit story too, and it's propaganda from the right and from the left. So it works both ways. And that's why the whole left right paradigm's bullshit, because you have neocons and neoprogs, neo-progressives and neoconservatives working hand in glove. You think Mitt Romney, who passed Massachusetts Care, which is, from everybody I know that lived in Massachusetts, said it was shit. You think he gives a shit whether something shitty like that gets passed in the U.S.? He's a neoconservative. You have idiots right now bitching that Trump wants us to leave Syria. Okay, and we're talking on the left, not just neocons. Your neo-progs are. They're saying, oh, it'll destabilize. It's going to destabilize. The best thing we can do is let them fucking kill each other and figure it out for themselves. And then our fingerprints aren't on this shit.
mm,
And that really irritates me, because how much blood and treasure has your nation, my nation, Canada, and other nations that were in the coalition of the billing fucking spent? Not just the treasure, but think about it. The blood of our youth, the blood of our people, all peoples. You know, it
yeah,
disgusts me. And that's why, the only reason why I like Gabby Gifford, and I really at one time hoped that Trump would put out an olive branch and offered her John Bolton's position, because she's not a neocon and she's not a neo-prog. She would give I think she'd give sounder advice than Bolton would. And honest to God, Madeleine Albright on the left and all their little advisors on the left that they've had with their leftist presidents doing the same thing Bolton does, they all want war. And why? To quote a movie, to make this motherfucking system of military fucking contracting, and we used to scare them with communism, blood sucking communism, and now we do it with terrorism. Well, if we had good laws that didn't allow terrorists to come into the country and we enforced them with will, and if we had a sound foreign policy that wasn't dictated by the military industrial complex on both sides of the aisle, which is a false dichotomy, the left right paradigm. But most people will never wake up to that unless you've seen it. You've seen it and you know the facts to it. And you can speak on that, brother, on your side of the pond.
Yeah, it's very much like when you touched on there that people are going, no, no, just stay out of it, stay out of it. Um, we're not staying out of it. It's the fact that it's look the US and the UK are in a difficult position at the minute because yes, we've spent so much blood and treasure out there, and ISIS were all of but defeated, you know. And then what's been left is or what's been made is some poor decisions to let Turkey basically just do what the fuck they want. That is it's going to have repercussions not just for that region but
I
for us
agree.
because let's be honest, we're going to have to go there and clean this fucking mess up because just
It
a
always,
few
it's
days
a cycle.
a few days ago through their fucking because let's be honest, Turkey aren't aren't the US, they aren't the UK, they aren't really good at precision bombing,
No.
special forces on the ground. You know what I mean, guiding in targets. It's basically dropping munitions from fucking height and hoping they land on the terrorists in inverted commas. These terrorists that we've been arming, training, and fighting alongside to crush ISIS. Well,
Well, but
IS. And the,
IS, ISIL, ISIS, I don't care what you call them, I call them USIS. You and I both know that was CIA funded. And I'm not going to back away from this because you and I both know this fact. It was a creation to destabilize a place that had somewhat stabilized. And then letting them know, oh, by the way, we're going to leave this area. But we wanted to state we had already hit Gaddafi, which made no sense for that one. That just ensured Europe would be invaded. And Gaddafi said, if you kill me, it will destroy Europe. And it has happened. And you can attest to that. And the secondary effect was they decided, you know what? We're going to go in to Iraq because we have a drop dead date when the American forces are leaving. And all Trump did was pull out uh, tier one dudes. Dude, there wasn't that many people we had there. And they were advising the Kurds. And I agree with you. You're going to see another Armenian genocide with the Kurds. You're going to see that.
yeah,
But that was
yeah,
something we all knew when we were there. The safest places you could go were places that the Kurds held. But you know as well as I do, the YKK or whatever it is, TKK, I can't remember, YPP, something like that.
YPG, and PKK.
Yeah, PKK. PKK was communist. Their ideological bent was communist, and then they don't even factor in the fucking Yazidis, which is a whole different set of issues. That's what made up the Kurdish coalitions. And so they don't even ideologically agree. And some of them are terrorist organizations that
Mm.
have links to Antifa, YPP in particular. And so, you know, it's nonsensical to me that we even put any more in there until we have a settlement as to what's coming up. Because right now, what I see that will probably happen, and I said this back in the day in '06 when I was up in Mosul, and also went up to Sulaymaniyah, which was so safe you didn't have to wear a helmet or your flak vest, and you didn't even have to carry your rifle. You could just have your pistol on your hip if you wanted to. You didn't even have to. It was that safe up there when Mosul was alive and on fire. '05, '06, man. And that's what I'm saying. The nonsense gets created. You can physically see it when you travel to these places, and you see pockets of peace no matter where you're at. It could be a full-fledged war zone. It's another thing I covered before, and you've probably know this to be true too. The safest place to be in a destabilized country, you have about 6 months when it destabilizes, because everybody's retribution killing. That's honestly what happens, and you know this. They're going after the person that pissed off their tribe or themselves.
Mm.
And they're not looking at the American or the Brit at that time. But about 6 months later, it's like an overnight guest. 3 days is about the max. Because on the third day, everybody starts to smell like fish. You don't really enjoy them in your house. And for countrymen that actually enjoy having their country, the same thing happens. And I'm averse to having anybody in countries for longer than 3 months. And if you're definitely not going to fight it to win it, why are we there in the first fucking place? Your
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. Why are we spilling our blood for your nation? And it's a sort of a sticking point of Afghanistan because we've lost so many lives there, and Iraq, where you can just see it's just why are we doing this? Especially with like when you're dealing with like sort of the Afghans, um, you're trying to train them, and there's just no willingness to fight. Like why are we doing this? Why am I spilling my blood, sweat, and tears for a nation you don't give a fuck about, and it's your nation. You've got to live here. I mean, there is the people that want their nation, democratically run and safe and free of terrorism. But then there's a large number of these people that just could not give a single fuck, and it's like, why are we bothering? Why should I send my patrol out today to get shot at and fucking blown up when you can't even be bothered to go out and patrol yourselves? You know, um, but it's put us in a strange position because now you've got Turkey, who's a member of NATO, dropping bombs on people that we were helping not so long ago, and it's only a couple of days ago that they've dropped bombs on U.S. Special Forces.
Yep.
Um, it fucking reeks. But again, like you were saying there, it's putting people like Trump and our government in a strange position because you've got the left screaming, "You warmongering pieces of shit! Stop fucking bombing and killing these innocent people." Then
But
it's like, okay,
they're
then,
pushing
but
it now. They're
yeah,
pushing it now.
yeah, it's like, okay, then what we'll do is we'll pull out. What are you doing? So you're letting these people hanging out to dry? And it's like, look, we're going to spill blood either way. But anytime we do it, you always jump on the other side of the fence to cry about it for votes and for outrage. Yeah, so, I mean, personally, in my personal view, I hope the fucking Turks get their heads smashed in by the Kurds, because it's about time that the Kurds had the nation of their own and let them
I
fucking
agree.
sort it out. Yes, they've got ties to Antifa, but I think what it is because of now. If you look into their sort of like their ideologies, it's not hardline communism. It's sort of a democratic communism. It's a weird sort
It
of
is a weird
ha-
mix
it's it,
mixed with
it's a weird
religion.
mix.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, yes, they have ties to Antifa, but not let's bring it down to our level and not to sort of like the mainstream media, social media level, where they're having people walking around the streets, bike chaining reporters. I think what it is because of the anti-fascist. Now, Antifa in the US and the UK, fucking let's be honest, they're just spoilt children. The Kurds
Rich
are
kids.
anti-fascist. The Kurds are anti-fascist. You've got the ISIS
Oh
that are
yeah.
fascists, that are hardline fascists. You know what I mean? Like the butchering people because of
I
different
agree.
ideologies. They're the real anti-fascists, the Kurds. So if I turned around and someone said to me, "What is your ideal person who fights against fascism and Antifa, if you want to call them that?" I'd say, look at the Kurds. I wouldn't say look at fucking University of Berkeley in California because they've got
Right.
really good anti-fascists there. They're just confused fucking children that want to buck against the system. You know what I mean? That raise fist, Black Power, Black Lives Matter, fucking 28 genders, fucking
All the nonsense.
yeah, the bullshit that the microcosm of fucking university young life. That doesn't sort of reflect the real life of like, okay, now you've left university, what's your gender studies degree going to get you a job? No, it's not.
No,
Let's be
it's
honest.
not.
Unless you want to go
It,
back and
no,
regurgitate all the shit and be a professor of it in these
no.
colleges.
The only job it might get you is in hiring. That's the
Mm,
scary part. In hiring human resources, because all that bullshit has promulgated major corporations. And what is the true definition of fascism? The merger of state and corporation and education into one thing. That's the classic definition. And if it's done incorrectly, correctly, look, I'm not going to bullshit anybody. The state is merged with corporations. That's a matter of fact. All nation states have a certain level of that with graft and corruption and whatnot. But the point is, when you make that the national focus, that's true fascism, along with academia and, of course, the propaganda media. So, it's a messy mess. It's all got to get sorted out, and this is way above my pay grade and yours, brother.
yeah.
And we may have
Um,
just been, like you said earlier, cogs in the wheel. We're just nothing more than track grease.
yeah, that's it, brother. That's it. Um, yeah. So, I mean, I stand with the Kurds, to be honest. If someone said to
I
me,
do too.
who would you like to see come out the other side of this? Certainly the Kurds. I think they
Me too.
deserve it,
Turkey,
and
Turkey.
I think they certainly deserve our fucking support. And I think Turkey needs to be sort of like dragged into line quite quickly.
I think
Whether that
Turkey should
happens,
be kicked out of NATO. I think
yeah,
that should be the first thing that happens. Once they did the aggressive line of moving against the Kurds, the quickest response to all Erdogan wants to do, Erdogan, however the fuck people, everybody wants to pronounce his name differently, and I don't really give a shit about that piece of shit. But my point is, once he did an aggressive move across the border, NATO, guess what? We're washing our hands with you, baby. Because if you want to say, oh, we're being attacked, no, you aggressively attacked. So now you
mm,
just lost your NATO membership. Get the fuck out. And
yeah,
sanctions should be put heavy on Turkey. Even though we have Incirlik Air Base and all this stuff, we need to just break ties with them for a while until they pull themselves to heel. Because it all started when Ataturk died. That's when you saw the Muslim Brotherhood jump into Turkey again and start radicalizing. And Erdogan, all he's doing is feeding that shit, brother.
yeah. Well, let's say they've been enabling ISIS for fucking ages, and all you've got to look at is what happened yesterday. They've just coincidentally, dropped munitions on one of the main detention facilities, and 10,000 hardcore ISIS fighters have just escaped.
Oh yeah,
You
oh
know,
yeah.
that's not by accident. You know what I mean? That's not by accident. You know, and they really think Turkey really think that okay, then we're going to go in and help you fucking clean it all up. If anything, we're going to be going to help the Kurds clean it up because they're the ones that have been doing the fucking fighting from house to house, village to village. You know, um, and let's be honest, what's going to happen? Obviously, because the fucking Turks are inept, they're going to be bombing more U.S. special forces, UK special forces, and that's just going to then NATO troops bombing NATO troops. Yes, the odd stray bomb or danger close incident is going to happen. But when you're purposely dropping munitions, knowing that there is coalition forces below this munition, guess what? That it doesn't matter if you're a member of NATO. It's an act of fucking war. You know
Well,
what I mean?
here's the fact: they're a member of NATO, so they have the access to all of NATO's data. That means spy satellites, everything.
Mm,
Nobody can convince me it's accidental. It's targeted, okay? I do believe this. And you can call me a conspiracy theorist or what, but I'm telling you, they have access to a certain level, at the general level, to all of that. And that means that the president of Turkey has access to that shit too. And we have a problem now.
yeah, it's like, again, it's a situation that's it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a quick fix. Let's be honest. And I think what we'll do is, I think we've touched on that one enough now, brother.
Yeah, let's.
Without getting, because it's going to become sort of a main
Yeah,
stage, and
yeah.
again, it's something we can touch on in the future
Yeah,
when sort of things progress.
yeah. My wife's up now, so this is a good point for us to stop the program, and that way I can finish what I promised her I'd get done, and it'll maintain some stability in the home. We've had a good show, I think, and if not, hey, people who are sitting on the big orange couch drinking their coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation can all step on our testicles with flip flops, bro.
High
That's all I'm
heels.
saying. High heels? No, no, no. That'll puncture. No, that's not fun.
Each their
Anyway,
own.
yeah. Oh my land. Anyway, so why don't we just break on this? And this is a conversation we'll come back to. I definitely will talk about the truth on the next show. I think we should bounce into the truth on uh, what it was like in Sarajevo back in the day when you were there with the UN before any U.S. forces were there. And we will touch on that if you want to. It's up to you. Your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, we can do it. I was actually there with the I4 guys,
Yep.
the implementation. So it was sort of after the UN had made a balls up of it, and then they went, okay, the UN's fucking done. They are getting the job done. We need to implement peace instead of just standing by and watching it. So and it was interesting times. Interesting times. That transition over from an absolutely useless decorative force and to someone that can actually get some good work done. That's all I'll
There we
say about
go.
that, man.
That'll work. We'll leave them with a little teaser and wanting to hear more about it. All right. With that being said, thanks for stopping by, chilling out on my big orange couch. I will slowly raise the drawbridge so you all can meander on out. You can finish your coffee, tea, soda, or adult libation on your way out. Thanks for stopping by Kaiser's Castle. With that being said, shuff out.